It is NFL Pro Bowl weekend, and of course, that means we have a lot of fun things ahead. However, this is the first weekend in a long time where we don't have to deep dive and give our predictions for a weekend set of games. Regardless, again, like I said, we're going to deep dive to the Pro Bowl action that starts tonight, finishes on Sunday. And outside of that, today it's going to be a laid back episode. I want to talk to you guys about some stuff around the league, what's to come with this podcast, and of course, I want to recap the season a little bit. So, should be tons of fun. If you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel on the road to 15,000. Starting off here with the Pro Bowl weekend, like I mentioned there just a few seconds ago, starts tonight. A lot of those fun dodgeball challenges, team challenges that they have been doing for the last couple of years, they take place tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. At least that is, of course, to my belief. Regardless, we're going to see a lot of star players this weekend. And even though maybe some players that should have been there aren't there, of course, there was a lot of Pro Bowl snubs, let's put it that way. It still should be fun. And of course, throughout the years, this weekend has gotten more laid back and, of course, a lot more fun. So Thursday should be fun tonight, of course, if I do happen to catch it. But on Sunday, that is where the Pro Bowl flag football game happens. And if you need a refresher, of course, if you tune in Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, of course, check your local listings. But if you didn't catch last year's event, it is changed from the regulated game that we knew and loved when we grew up and watched it for years, where Sean Taylor was hitting the Bills punter, of course, almost knocking him out unconscious, right? Is a good way to put it. It is now a 7-on-7 flag football game. So, of course, no offensive linemen, no defensive linemen, unless they are, of course, going to go out there and, of course, play some wide receiver. But it's a lot more 7-on-7 action nowadays, flag football style. And I would say that it stops the physicality in the events. But last year, we saw Tyreek Hill get blown up pretty good by, of course, Jalen Ramsey. But it should be fun. Of course, it's not the physical game that we grew up with, but it's better than what we saw the last couple of years when it was 11 on 11. And there was ultimately, it was kind of just practice, right, for both teams because there was no physicality on either side of the football. But I do want to get into recapping this season, right? Of course, a long season. Of course, we talked about the NFL before the season started. We talked about it throughout the entire preseason. And then, of course, the last 18, 19, 20 weeks, we've talked about each and every game, we deep dive into each and every event that's happened. So I just want to go through. I want to talk about some things that, I'm going to take away from this NFL season, the 2023-24 season. Of course, we still have the biggest game to go, but just some of my favorite moments from this past year. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to start here at number 5 with the fact that defenses stepped up this year. Of course, the last couple of years, we've seen just, year after year, we've seen offenses have gotten better and better than ever. They've scored more and more than ever. This year, the defense has said, nah, we're gonna take back our throne. And of course, we're gonna recapture that fact that mantra that defenses win championships. Whether if that's true or not, I'm gonna sit here and say that I'm happy to see that defenses stepped up. It was a change of pace this year when you see guys like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs struggling, even though, of course, they don't have the most dominant offense, but just dominant offenses around the league, like the Bengals when they were healthy, they were struggling. The Eagles, after teams figured them out, they were struggling. There was a lot of offenses around the league that weren't putting up the 30-plus points a game that they were in years prior. So I'm just happy that defense has stepped up. It was a change of pace. And, of course, it made a lot more games lower scoring, grinded out games, and, of course, down to the wire, just due to the fact that defenses stepped up. But I do want to shout out to the Cleveland Browns. I'm a Browns fan. But our defense just looked amazing this year. And without that number 1, number 2 ranked defense, we're not an 11-win ball club. So, just for things like this, a change of pace this year, it's always good to see in the NFL, just so it doesn't get as cut and dry, on a yearly basis. Next year is going to be interesting. I will say that, defenses, of course, they made a statement this year. They did step up. However, the offensive coordinators and the offensive minds around the league are going to come back with a vengeance. They're going to come back and try and get back to scoring at a, NFL record levels. So it's going to be interesting next year to see can the defenses continue at this rate or even get better, or will the offenses bounce back and get back to what we've seen the last decade or so. But then we get into number 4. The only specific game I had on this list was number 4 here with the Eagles and Bills. I think it was week 14, week 15, late in the season. The Bills and Eagles, of course, matched up, and the game was rainy, terrible conditions. It went to overtime, and then the Eagles had a crazy, game-winning field goal kick. It was from 60 yards out where, excuse me, I think it was actually week 11 or 12. Regardless, it was before the Eagles went on their big losing streak and the Bills, unironically, went on their big winning streak. The Eagles had a crazy, 60 plus yard game winning field goal kick in the rain to win that game. And of course, the Bills, they lost another crazy overtime game, but that was the only game in particular. Some other great games, of course. We had the Lions and 49ers game, even though that the Lions, it didn't end how they wanted. It was still a good game on paper, where the fact that a team was up big, they were the underdog in the game on the road, a team that's never been to the Super Bowl, let alone won it. They were up big on of course, a lot of people's favorites, but then it all just fell apart in the second half, and a lot of poor decisions, a lot of analytic-based decisions on Dan Campbell's part ultimately are the reason why we have the Niners and the Chiefs rematch from just a few years ago. But a lot of other great games around the league. And hopefully, right? The best game is only ahead of us with the Chiefs and the 49ers. But we're going to get into some other moments here, right? With number 3, beginner's luck, right? Is it beginner's luck? And of course, I'm referencing here to the rookies, CJ Stroud, not Kyren Williams. Technically, it was his rookie year. But CJ Stroud, Tank Dell is a good way to Puka Nakuya. I don't know if it's beginner's luck, right? But we've had a lot of talented rookies this year play at levels they shouldn't be playing at. We'll start with CJ Stroud. Of course, he set record after record. He was on top of the league in a lot of statistics. And not only was he dominating with his personal statistics, his team was winning ball games. CJ Stroud, I think, only lost 4 or 5 total games all year. Let's not forget that the Texans lost 2 or 3 games when he was out late in the season. But of course, this is a guy that was just dominant. He just had this aura about him that he was just different. And not only, did he have this aura, he kind of broke the mold that Ohio State quarterbacks can't succeed at the next level. He did that, and he did that in a big way. And of course, he just had this Joe Burrow kind of, change, I guess impact with him that he brought to this Houston Texans franchise. That, dare I say it, this team this year kind of looked better than any Deshaun Watson version Houston Texans. And of course, the defense was amazing. Will Anderson, the number 3 overall pick, led that defensive unit. There was a lot of talented rookies there, especially in Houston with, of course, CJ Stroud. Tank Dell was amazing for a good stretch of the season before he went down with an injury. Will Anderson was the top of the league in a lot of statistics. Some other edge rushers are guys like Byron Young. Of course, he had a good year. You had some corners that had some crazy statistics. But then we want to dive into a guy like Puka Nakuya, an all-pro receiver in his first career year, 5th round pick out of Duke University. That doesn't scream game-changing, franchise-changing wide receiver. But who knows? That guy might be the number 1 wide receiver there on his own team now over a guy like Cooper Kupp. But of course, that's a different argument for a different day. But there's just a lot of talented rookies this year on both sides of the ball that made crazy impacts. And it's just great to see. Now, of course, we still have a lot of good guys, a lot of talented prospects from this past draft that need time to develop, just like any other year, any other rookie. But this year, there was just some that stood out from the crowd and stood out from other years that it was just special to watch, seeing guys first year making such a huge impact. But at number 2, I'm going to talk about the parity. I think the parity this year was something that was so amazing. And in the NBA side of things, we see this a lot, especially the last couple of years, as we have had 5 different NBA champions in the last 5 years, which was completely different from when the Warriors had Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and that crew, where they were winning almost every single year. This year, I think it is the start of something new in the NFL side of things, where we're getting parity, right? We saw teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of teams had, though, or a lot of people had, though, that unit as a 4-win team, a 3-win team. Heck, I had him as a 5-win team coming into the season. That team was 9-8, 9-8 going into the playoffs. They barely beat the Panthers on the way to get there, and then they take down the reigning NFC champions in the first round. You have a team like the Lions making some noise this year. The Cleveland Browns, 2 franchises that have struggled historically, made it, to the playoffs and look like serious dark horse contenders. I will say the Chiefs, they, of course, were the Chiefs, but they struggled this year. We had stretches where, like, the Broncos looked like a legitimate team. The Miami Dolphins looked unstoppable. They put up 70 points in a game this year. I just think that, overall, there was out of 32 teams, there was like 24, 25 of them that could have made the playoffs, at a certain point in the season. And I just think, when you made it to the playoffs, you really could have made an argument for any team in any game. We even see a team like the Packers who started off rough, but Jordan Love turned that corner and they even beat one of the most dominant offenses and defenses in recent memory in the Cowboys in round one on the road in the playoffs to be the first ever 7 seed to, of course, win in the playoffs. I just think that this year, I love to see parity, of course, around the league. I don't want to say it gets boring, but it's definitely refreshing when you get a new winner every year outside of the Chiefs winning every other year or the Patriots when they were dominant or before that, when we had other dynasties in years past. I think I would prefer parity over just one dominant dynasty that everyone is trying to take down, no matter the sport, right? But the parity this year is one of my favorite moments. And at number one, it's a kind of a cop-out answer. But before we get to number one, drop some of your favorite moments from this past NFL season, whether if it was in the preseason, right? Whether if it was during the season, it could be something so small, but to you, it was just something that you're going to take away from the 2023-24 NFL season. But at number one, again, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'm going to say the channel growth, right? And of course, Amir, he's not on the show today, but of course, he wanted to mention that being a part of the channel was huge for him. And of course, we appreciate his contributions to the channel since week 6 of the NFL season. So he's been here a while. But I just think the channel growth during this NFL season has been amazing. It's been unprecedented. And I just think it's something that I couldn't even have seen for myself before starting, because I think when we started the NFL year, I believe I was at 1,000 subscribers or 700. It was in that range. And of course, now we're about at 13,000, 12 to 13,000 subscribers. We're on the road to bigger and better things. But I do want to thank you guys for all the support throughout this NFL season. But then we get into a quick little shout out. Okay, a quick little shout out as next Thursday, it's not going to be an NFL show. It's going to be an NBA trade deadline episode live, of course. The NBA trade deadline is, of course, from I think 2 to 3 o'clock next Thursday, or at least that's when it ends. Is 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be going live. So from either 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. or from 2 to 3, I will be going live for next Thursday's podcast. So no podcast, but there will be. I will be live. So if you want to join and of course watch along, of course react to all the crazy trades as they happen, if they happen, hopefully, right? I will be live here on the channel. So if you want to stop back, of course, you're welcome. But then that reminds me, I want to talk about some things that are to come for this channel, right? What are the future podcasts going to look like with the NFL season winding down? And last year, I kind of transitioned from, purely, one a week from NBA and NFL to purely NBA. And I know almost half of my followers here are from, they're NFL fans more so than the contrary, which is more so on the NBA side, right? I think there's a few of you guys that are, tuning into every single one, watching both NBA and NFL. If you are, of course, shout out to you. But this year, instead of completely getting rid of the NFL side of things for a couple of weeks, I want to keep it going. So for the NFL side of things, not next Thursday, but after that, we're going to be doing, of course, the season recap. We're going to be talking about the Super Bowl, and we're going to be handing out some playoff awards, which is always fun. We're going to be doing some mock drafts on the channel here with the offseason coming up. We're going to have some free agency predictions, free agency reactions. This year, I don't want to take those extended weeks off or almost a month off from giving you guys some NFL content, because I know, of course, some of you guys aren't, following the NBA side of things. So for the NFL side of things, not next Thursday, but after that, of course, it will be NFL coverage each and every week. Don't worry about it. But then I also want to mention that this Saturday, we may or may not be recording an episode about the NBA All-Star Draft. And of course, they don't do the draft anymore, but I might, gather some peeps, and we might bring a draft for you guys, which is always fun, just like we did last year. But for the NFL side of things, that's what's to come. And if you're curious, of course, the NFL 58 or NFL Super Bowl 58 predictions, preview, top 10 players, hot takes, and more, all of that will be coming this upcoming Tuesday. So it's going to be a little different just because the NBA trade deadline throws a wrench in things. However, that is what's to come on the NFL side of things. For the NBA side of things, It's a lot of the same, man. We're going to be talking about some of the NBA All-Star drafts coming up. We're going to have our reactions to the NBA All-Star draft. Of course, the trade deadline episode is coming up. A lot is to come. Just be on the lookout. And of course, I always release some teasers over on Instagram. So at the Anomaly Podcast _ you can follow me over there. And of course, you will get an idea of what is to come in, on paper. If I know I just threw a lot at you guys, but on paper, it will be there for you guys if you want to check it out. Then I want to talk about here the Senior Bowl. I do want to let you guys know I mentioned NFL mock drafts, and I'll talk about them here in a moment. I do want to let you guys know this year I wanted to deep dive more into the NFL draft. Last year, of course, I did my basic research just like I do each and every year. This year, I want to deep dive into the NFL mock drafts, into all these prospects, and of course, the NFL junkie that I am. I think I need to do my due diligence more so than ever. But I do want to let you guys know the Senior Bowl is currently underway. Of course, we had a day one just yesterday or the day before. And of course, there's a lot of interesting things that have happened. Of course, I've seen Bo Nix struggle, right? I've seen some other guys prosper and make the most out of their opportunities. And this year, I will say I did tune in, of course, and it was more competitive than ever. And I think it's really just because they let some of these juniors that might classify for the draft, they were there competing with the seniors, right? So I think this year is more competitive than ever, and I think it's brought us a lot of great highlights. Especially shout out to a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. He has made some noise, and he is definitely climbing up my draft ranks. But I want to let you guys know this year we have 4 to 5 mock drafts on the channel coming, and I will let you know I'm doing more research than ever to get you guys, of course, the most accurate information. But then, of course, I mentioned it with the NFL mock drafts. The Senior Bowl is underway, and like I talked about it. But this one just coincides, right? It goes, hand in hand with it. I'm going to be doing at least 3 mock drafts here on the channel, just like last year. But I'm aiming to do 4 to 5, and that, of course, will start here, after Super Bowl season. So after the Super Bowl season starts, every other week we're going to be bringing you guys another podcast here on the channel about a mock draft, right? So that should be fun. But then to close off the show, and again, I want to throw this out there. Today's a quicker episode. You can argue this is not even a podcast, right? But I still wanted to keep the streak going. So this could be whatever. But I do want to throw this out there. Way too early NFL predictions for next year. We're going to be talking about this, of course, in a couple weeks. So my answers may change. However, some way too early NFL predictions. Of course, we can throw out a Super Bowl champion. This year, I want to say, I had the Cincinnati Bengals. They, of course, did not play the way that I thought they would. But I'm going to keep that, sentiment going into next year. I think the Cincinnati Bengals, if they can have a good offseason, if they can keep T. Higgins, I think they could be in the running to win it yet again. However, there's a lot of other talented teams out there, like the Cleveland Browns. If they can get healthy, again, my bias might show, but we are definitely in the running. If Deshaun Watson can play like 70% of what he was in Houston, I don't know if there's a team that can stop us with a healthy Nick Chubb coming back. Of course, the Browns, I would say we can stay healthy, but this year we were the every year for the San Francisco 49ers. Our health team was not there, and we went through it felt like 15 different offensive linemen. But if we can stay relatively healthy next year, getting Nick Chubb back, getting this defense back, and I know it's kind of a predictable defense, but it's still dominant. So if we can bring everybody back, and of course, there's rumblings even that T. Higgins might be coming over to the Cleveland Browns. I know, sounds crazy, but recently he's been following everybody and, of course, liking different tweets that he wants to be a Cleveland Brown in 2024. So just imagine that offense. Of course, we might lose Amari Cooper, but we're going to be bringing in T. Higgins, a guy that arguably, well, I will say, is probably better than Amari Cooper. He could be our number one next year. There's just a lot of different opportunities for the Browns next season. I'm excited to see what they can do. Of course, you still have teams like the Eagles coming back. They have to figure out some offensive line questions. You have teams like the Cowboys, the 49ers. Like I talked about early in the episode, there's just a lot of parity, and I love parity when it comes to sports because it's just when you can predict, like the NBA was for a stretch of time. Okay, we know the Warriors and the Cavs are going to the finals. Why are we sitting here watching 82 regular season games and 4 playoff series rounds, right? We know it's going to be these 2 teams in the finals, and it was for 4 straight years. That's just not enjoyable. And to me, when you have this in the NBA, like the NBA is now, and how the NFL is now, where there's a lot of parity, where you can make an argument that there's 5 to 6 different real legitimate Super Bowl contenders in each conference. But then you also have a group of teams that, are dark horses, hey, what if the Minnesota Vikings, what if they make a big splash for quarterback this offseason? Or what if the Bears stick with Justin Fields and they surround him with 2 top 10 prospects? How are they going to be taken next year as far as contender status? There's just a lot of teams, and I think we're going to talk about it in the coming weeks as far as where I think these teams will stand. Some way too early NFL predictions, right? Power rankings. We're going to do that after free agency. But again, I'll say MVP, maybe Super Bowl. I'll say MVP for sure. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow, Super Bowl contender. There's so many different options. So I will actually hold off on that one. I'll talk to you guys about that in a few weeks here. But MVP, give me Joe Burrow. I'll say the Browns come back better than ever. And I'll say next year, there's going to be even more parity around the league. Hopefully, of course, that is health dependent. But I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things coming up for the NFL next year. Maybe next year we also see a non-quarterback win the award. But I don't know. This year was one of those anomaly years, no pun intended, where a lot of quarterbacks did get injured. So if there was a year to give it to a non-quarterback, it would have been this season. But of course, Lamar Jackson got hot at the right time, won the fans over, won, it seems like, the popular vote over, and he will be the 2024 NFL MVP. But some way too early predictions. I'll say Joe Burrow is my MVP. I'll say the Browns are a division winner. I'll say that the Browns, I can't really say that. Counterintuitive, right? I'll say the Browns are back and better than ever, and they're actually taken as real Super Bowl contenders. I'll say the same with the Lions, 2 franchises that haven't won or been in the Super Bowl. I'll say the Texans continue their momentum. Of course, I want to see Anthony Richardson take that next step up next season. A lot of crazy things can happen, but as of right now, I'm just excited for this upcoming weekend. Of course, tonight's action, and then next week's the Sunday's action with the NFL Pro Bowl week, and then after that, when we talk about free agency, of course, that's always a fun time to talk about where different players can go and how the landscape of the NFL will change for not only this season but years to come. Of course, dependent on certain decisions. There's just a lot of things that can happen. And of course, stay tuned to the channel. We're going to be going through everything, covering everything until the next NFL season starts. But of course, Super Bowl 58 is first, and we're going to talk about that next Tuesday. But again, shorter episode today. I just wanted to really do a laid back episode, talk about what's to come for this podcast and its future. Talk about, of course, the Pro Bowl weekend, which is coming up tonight with, of course, like the dodgeball competitions, and then Sunday with the actual Pro Bowl event, the flag football game. I'm going to try to tune into those as much as I can. Of course, we still have Senior Bowl action coming up. But again, laid back episode, and I wanted to talk about what was to come. And of course, I want to show a little bit of gratitude for, what we've witnessed throughout this NFL season. And of course, for you guys for supporting it along the way. But that is really going to do it. I think this might be the shortest podcast in our history. But of course, episode 136 in the books. And I will supplement this shorter podcast with another one this Saturday. We're going to be doing some NBA All-Star action. And of course, that'll supplement the shorter episode today. So 3 podcasts this week. You can really even say 2 with how short this one is. But without further ado, I'm going to stop yapping. I'll see you guys on Saturday. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I'm out of here.